Hey there, fellow cash flow hustlers. This is your host, Justin Grimes. I appreciate you tuning into the show today as we explore actionable tips and stories aimed at creating cash flow and ultimately a more fulfilling life. With us today is the original Cashflow Ninja and somebody that I find to be inspiring and with the story and his mission and all that good stuff. So without further ado, Mr. MC Laubscher. MC, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Justin. Thank you so much for having me on. Honored to be on your show.
Awesome. Thank you very much. A little bit of background on MC. He's a wealth and investment strategist and financial educator. He's the president and CEO of Producers Wealth and creator and host of the popular and top-rated business and investing podcast, Cashflow Ninja. His purpose and mission is to help producers and creators, entrepreneurs, investors, business owners, and professionals create, protect, and multiply their wealth in any economy. MC challenges existing societal belief systems and misinformation around concepts such as money, savings, investing, wealth, and retirement. And we're going to dive into all that good stuff today. So with that said, you mind giving the listeners a little bit more about your background and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, so originally from South Africa, I came here in 2001 to the United States. So growing up in South Africa was quite interesting, through a very interesting time frame. I grew up in the country's history, so that definitely made me and turned me into the person that I am today. So always critically thinking, always looking at all the different sides of the coin, right? And always reading very, very wide on a lot of different opinions and forming my own opinion. So for listeners out there that might be familiar with South Africa, having been an apartheid state. So when President Nelson Mandela was actually released from prison, I was in high school, I think. What was it, 1991? So just before high school. So primary school, because we only have two there, primary and high. Okay. But yeah, and then in 1994, he became the first democratically elected president in that country. So in 2001, I came to the United States. I traveled quite a bit, played in a rugby league over here up until 2007. And while I was playing sports, I read to keep myself busy too, especially on trips. Came across the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which is one of the best-selling books in personal finance and investing ever. It's still a bestseller. And that really changed my context and how I look at things. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole, reading as much as I can, studying, reading The Creature from Jekyll Island by Mr. G. Edward Griffin, The Mystery of Capital by DeSoto, and all these different authors sharing all of these things and really educating you of how things work. So I made it my mission to figure out how things work. Tony Robbins is a saying, success leaves clues. There's a blueprint. So when I played sports, I just looked at the best players in my position, try to figure out what they do in all aspects of their life, whether it's their training, whether it's their nutrition, whether it's their recovery, and then on the field, what they did, what made them exceptional, what made them great. I took the same approach when it came to wealth and investing, and look at what the wealthiest families and individuals were doing, and also big banks, corporations, financial institutions. Those guys created the game of money that we're all playing in. So I just studied what they did, and I've been obsessively doing this for 2 years. As you mentioned, I'm the president and chief wealth and investment strategist at Producers Wealth. So we help producers and creators, which I include as entrepreneurs, investors, business owners, professionals, create, protect, and multiply their wealth in any economy. And most of it is completely outside of Wall Street. And then I'm also the creator and host of the Cashflow Ninja podcast, where we share strategies regarding how to generate income in the new economy, whether it's through real estate, commodities, businesses, crypto and blockchain, paper assets, all the different asset classes, which are just fantastic tools to create cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were getting started out, so you were playing rugby, you went down the rabbit hole with the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. And then from there, did you begin implementing some of these strategies, or how did that kind of journey evolve?
Yeah, so I think what a lot of people do, the mistake that they make is they read something and they learn something that, for instance, that Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or any of these massive folks or Warren Buffett's doing, right? And then they think to themselves, well, I'm not Warren Buffett, so I can't do that. So what I did, and being from Africa, they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So you just break it up into smaller chunks and implement it on smaller levels within your own life. And once you start doing that,
Well, lose you there. All right. 3, 2, 1. So with you, while you were playing rugby, you kind of walk through maybe the progression of how you began reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and then took steps progressively to get to maybe where you're at. Long story maybe, but just kind of share with the listeners your journey.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did was I learned from these very, very successful people. And I took small steps. People get so overwhelmed when they read about Warren Buffett or now Ray Dalio, right? His principal book is quite a big one. And you study a lot of these very, very successful people. I think people get so overwhelmed and they look at it and they go, oh, well, I'm not Warren Buffett, or I'm not David Rockefeller, or I'm not, any of these folks. And being from South Africa, we always joke and say, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You don't try to eat the entire elephant. So the same approach to that is you follow, you study, you see what they do, you take the principles and then some of the strategies and you implement it on a smaller scale in your own life. And over the course of time, you're going to see massive changes. And it all begins just with a mindset. You can study guys like Tony Robbins and all these folks. And just by changing how you think and how you look at the world, your life improves immediately already, right? And you haven't really done anything but just change your mind. The same thing with strategies, with money and investment strategies. So what I learned, I put into practice and I took action on a smaller scale. So when I bought, my mom actually gave me the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I purchased a property, actually a 2-bedroom, 2-bath real estate property, probably within 6 months later after reading that book, maybe even sooner. So I took action. I learned, my context expanded. I learned more about real estate. And then the next step is to actually go out and do it, right? And then share your journey with other folks as you do it. But I think the main point that I want to make is I love the US mindset and how people think sometimes, because they think big. People think about, if you talk entrepreneurship, it's about quitting your job and becoming the next Elon Musk, right? It's not building a side hustle, growing it. So that's the big think that folks have in the US, which is amazing. But sometimes that big think, and the media plays into this, can scare away folks from just taking actionable steps every single day within their life to make a massive difference for themselves going forward.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, a good analogy there with the one bite at a time, because it could be rather overwhelming when you look at the 100 steps it's going to take, something maybe even just as simple as a real estate transaction. There's some things in there that maybe get a little complicated, but you just one day at a time.
Yeah.
So from your experience, so you've interviewed, I don't know, hundreds of individuals. Some of them maybe, play in this wealth arena, wealth creation and protection. From your perspective, what is it that the wealthy 1% do that the other 99% of the population just consistently misses?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that people have to realize is what the wealthy, the ultra affluent, the 1%ers, whatever you want to call them, they don't do the same thing as everyone else. And most of the time, by the way, if you're doing this, if everyone is doing one thing, if you just go the opposite direction of the herd, you're probably going to be right more than you're going to be wrong. So they don't do the same thing as everyone else. They actually don't do a lot of things differently. They do the complete opposite. So the complete opposite of everything that what everyone else is doing. So for instance, where a lot of folks are put into this mindset of accumulating money, right? Accumulation, saving for retirement, saving. First of all, it's not saving for retirement. It's actually investing and speculating. They've kind of convoluted that word, but that's the accumulation mindset. So you're going to save money for 30 to 40 years, and then you're going to try and convert that money into income. Now, there's a lot of things, a lot of problems with that whole, and this is the plan that the majority of people do, right? And I can summarize it in one word: hope. You're hoping that you're going to give your money that knows what to do with it. You're hoping that that person's going to be successful. You're hoping that there's going to be a mountain of money when you get there. You're hoping that markets are going to be at all-time highs. What if you had to retire in 2008 and 2009, right? Where you lost all of the value in your home, you lost all of the value of your retirement accounts. And then you're hoping that you're going to be able to convert that into income. And at that stage, you can't risk a lot of your money. You have to go to safer stuff. So then you're hoping that interest rates are higher. Well, guess what? For a lot of retirees, it's not. And then you're hoping that really, and this is kind of disturbing, that you don't live too long because you're going to outlive your money. So what do the rich do? The complete opposite. They focus on income right away. You know, instead of saving, accumulating, and then converting into income, they focus on cash flow from day one. Because cash flow has an immediate feedback loop. You can invest for cash flow to keep up with inflation. You can control it. You have more control over your own money and your own destiny. The other thing is, the average person is so obsessed with products. And it's full of the media. This mutual fund. Is real estate a good investment? Is a home an investment? People focus on products constantly, where what do the wealthy do? They focus on strategy. The wealthy focus on an overall strategy. They look at what they want to accomplish, their goals. They have principles and values that they draw from and base all of this on. Then eventually down the line, I mean, there's a lot that I'm skipping over now. Then they look at asset classes, which is in this sphere of confidence and competence, what they know. They'll never invest in something that they don't understand. Warren Buffett talks about that quite a bit. But then they integrate financial vehicles too as part of an overall strategy. And then within those vehicles are products. So the products is the last thing that they're thinking about. They're thinking about an overall approach and a strategy to this. The other thing though too is the average person is always chasing higher returns. How many times have we seen this? You know, they're just that one lucky break away from making a lot of money and getting it rich, where the wealthy focus on efficiency. You know, it's Justin, it's really, I'm learning a lot right now. Through my network, I always try and learn, and I've met some folks that are advisors in the family office space. Actually, had a meeting with them today again. It's quite fascinating. And some of the strategies that they focus on, because they show me, you know, what goes on in family offices and how they plan. They spend more than 80% of just being efficient, I would say, and 20% actually on returns, because they know, just to give your listeners an example, those families know that if they can reduce their taxes by 20%, that there's no return in the marketplace over 30 to 40 years that can beat that. So cash flow leaks, right? Money flowing out of your economy, which you're not even knowing about. You're overpaying on taxes. You're overpaying on fees. Bad debt, right? There's good debt and bad debt. A lot of people focus on debt's bad. Well, there can be good debt and bad debt. So all of that stuff leaks cash flow out of your economy. It's not efficient. For instance, qualified retirement plans. Warren Buffett does not have a 401k or an IRA because it's not tax efficient for positioning assets. So they focus 80% there. Then they focus on investing in themselves, their businesses, and then also investing in syndications and partnerships where they partner with people that are absolute ninjas in what they do. So the other thing about focus too is they follow one course until successful. They zone in and they focus. You know, it was Andrew Carnegie that said, you know, put all of your eggs in one basket and watch that basket like a hawk. You know, so diversifying for them is diversifying within an asset class that they understand. For instance, in real estate syndications, you can be an equity investor in a syndication, and you can also be a debt investor in that same deal. So there's two ways of diversifying. You're still in the same deal, but on the one side, you're the bank. On the other side, you're getting cash flow from the equity, right? And equity grows in it. So they focus, and then they find ways to tweak and manage risk within an asset class that they truly know, they understand, and this is in their sphere of competence, right? And what they do. And then, you know, some of the other stuff that I will just say, they know the rules of money. They know that money needs to move constantly. Idle money dies. What does the big banks and financial institutions tell you? You know, they tell you, give me your money. We're going to park your money here for 30 to 40 years, and then you'll have a mountain of money when we give it back to you, and you're going to have that retirement on all the ads that they purchase on CNN and all these other stations, right? Well, what do financial institutions do with their money? They turn it over and over and over and over again. So I would say, like, every decision that you make, think of it from a bank and from a financial institution's perspective. Like a house, for instance, it's the bank's asset. It's a very good asset for the bank. And what makes it even greater for the bank sometimes is if people want to pay off their house sooner, which means they increase their cash flow. The cash flow just increased to the bank. Their risk declined because your equity is more in the house, so they have less of a risk now if you just walk away. And over the long term, you lose some of the tax benefits through your mortgage deduction and so forth. So you always have to think of it from their perspective. Here's one powerful thing that I'll finish off with of what the wealthy do. The average person value things. The wealthy value knowledge, relationships, and ideas.
Nice. Taking some notes there. Yeah, that's awesome. How about yeah, that's awesome stuff. With let's dig in a little bit to the infinite banking concept, which is I find it to be fascinating. You know, I mean, you're paying tax on the seed as opposed to the harvest. You know, there's some very interesting concepts within that realm. Would you mind schooling us a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for your listeners that's not familiar with the infinite banking concept, so the infinite banking concept is a strategy based on a dividend-paying whole life insurance policy. Now, again, you know, as I mentioned, it's just insurance. Insurance just as real estate, just as Bitcoin, just as all of these things. It's how you use it. So the strategy includes structuring it very, very differently. What you're actually doing is you're overfunding this insurance policy for it to maximize cash value. And by the way, this is with a mutual insurance company. They've been around for 200 years. They have a track record of over 100 years of paying dividends consecutively. They performed during the Great Depression, the Great Recession, market crashes, and so forth. So insurance companies also are very, very stable companies, especially mutual ones. I'm not making a reference to stock companies, especially stock companies that's part of the casino. Example, AIG. So they don't fit into this bucket, but insurance in general is a very, very good business. Warren Buffett loves it. Mutual insurance companies, because they manage their company, so the policy holders also manages it with a very long range view, right? Long term, they don't have to make a lot of risky bets or investments because they don't have to announce earnings on the stock exchange, right? And they don't have to worry about their stock price. The only thing that they're concerned about is maximizing performance of the company for shareholders. So what the infinite banking concept entails is using this overfunded whole life insurance policy with a mutual insurance company. And then once you've funded this policy, you actually can access your money for anything at any time, up to 90% of your cash value through a policy loan. So it almost acts like a credit line against your cash value. So, and this is something you can access your money at a certain percentage, 5% in this case, right? So just like with a bank is a deposit section where you make deposits, and they have a lending section where they make loans out to borrowers. The leverage of this is when you take a credit, when you access your cash value from this policy at 5%, and you invest then in an asset that pays you 7 to 8% higher, and then redirect the cash flow back into your policy. So where it fits in really nicely is with investments. It integrates with real estate. It integrates with businesses. It integrates with a lot of things, because what you essentially are doing is, quote unquote, capturing your wealth in your own economy and then leveraging it to go and generate more wealth. So, yeah, that's kind of just a 30,000-foot view on the overall strategy. I'll give you an example quick. So how we've worked at Producers Wealth with clients, and there's for instance someone that we created an overall strategy for, right? Like we have a whole formula of how we do this. We figure out a passive income goal, what they would like to achieve monthly and then annually. And then we also look at, your strengths, which is your mental capital, your relationship capital, because that'll equal your financial capital. It's just the wealth formula that I learned from a mentor of mine. So, because you have to look at the strengths of the individual. So if it's in real estate, the person knows real estate or businesses, you're going to leverage that in this whole equation. Well, let's just say it's real estate. And for this particular client, we looked at real estate, and we could generate about an 8% return consistently, not an average rate of return like they say on the Wall Street mutual fund brochures, which is another podcast episode. Yeah, it's a lot of spin in that. But a consistent return of 8%. And let's just say, for this particular person, they wanted $360,000 a year at 8%. We know that they have to deploy about $4.5 million of capital, right? Over the course of 20 years, for instance, what they wanted to accomplish this goal with. Now, you can do that without the insurance, and great, you would have achieved your goal, let's just say around 18, 19 years, around about the same time. Well, combining the insurance and integrating it with that, not only did you accomplish your goal at 18 years in some of the scenarios that we ran for this individual, but you would also have $1.8 million tax-free in addition to that, because the growth in these vehicles are tax-free. So if I didn't mention that before, your money's guaranteed in an insurance company. The growth is guaranteed. You get access to dividends as a policyholder. And then also the growth is tax-free inside of it. So it's also private. It has asset protection. So for instance, when folks in the Enron scandal, not that you want to use them as an example, they had some permanent permanent life insurance products with them, which had the same asset protection, so they couldn't even claw back there, and it was private, right? So there's a lot of asset protection in there. There's privacy in there. There's continuation strategies that can be built into that in case someone has a disability in their working life. And then also from an efficiency standpoint of transferring wealth over to the next generation, it helps with that, because you want to position your assets as efficiently as possible, have use control over it. Dollar maximization, the same dollar doing many different jobs. In this example, we have a dollar earning a predictable return for you in the policy. That same dollar is then leveraged to invest into real estate. And I mean, with real estate, the same thing: cash flow, appreciation, tax benefits, equity, and so forth. So that same dollar is doing many, many jobs simultaneously. And then from a tax standpoint, as I mentioned, it's efficient and transferring wealth efficiently. Also, in the real estate example, real estate is passive income in this example. It's taxed the least. If you look at Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, for your listeners that's not familiar with it, on the left-hand side is the E and the S, which is the employee, the self-employed, and on the right-hand side is the B and the I, the business owner and the investor. The investor is, as a passive investor, is the least taxed people in those quadrants. So you want to generate income from Yeah, I think that's, just a summary. I went over it pretty quickly, but yeah, I think the big takeaway there is the efficiency side of it, and then integrating it with another asset class for maximum efficiency.
Nice. Perfect. Switch pace here a little bit. So an important part of growth is continually planning and setting goals. Would you mind sharing a little bit about maybe a goal or two that you have currently?
Yeah, there's quite a number of them. So, but yeah, so what I do as far as goals too, I set my health goals, I set my wealth goals, my social goals, which includes my family goals, my family and my friends, and then as you mentioned, the education, the personal and professional fulfillment. So, right there, I've got a couple of things in the work. I'm actually trying to put out a book explaining these strategies by the end of this year. So that's one of my goals to put out, is just to put that all together. So there'll be an audiobook and then a video series kind of available on it, just walking through all these different things in more detail. But that's one of my big goals now. And then also just continuing to spread the word, spread the message, because I do think, we are headed for very turbulent times. So I'm trying to reach a lot of folks to share with them just the knowledge that I've learned from other folks over my lifetime.
Yeah, no, your platform's grown a lot, and it's got some really invaluable content on there. It's just awesome stuff. So, yeah, for the listeners out there looking for some good content, MC's got tons of it. So, all right, man, you ready for the rapid hustle round?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, man. What is your favorite resource, book, podcast, or other that you hadn't mentioned yet that you found useful on your cash flow hustle journey?
I follow a lot of stuff from Grant Cardone. I think there's a lot of great resources on there from building a business. I listen to the Self-Made Man podcast too with Mike Dillard. I think that's a fantastic resource on a lot of stuff. He's a fantastic online marketer, and you have to be, because we're all online. All business are conducted online. So I think that's two resources just at the top of my mind that I follow.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that. If you could give yourself one piece of advice when you're starting out on your cash flow hustle journey, what would it be?
That's a great question. 3 things, really. The first thing is critical thinking. If I go back to my younger self, critical thinking, figure out how to solve problems through critical thinking, and be resourceful. If you can critically think for yourself, because you're going to need that, and figure out a way to solve problems, and then figure out who you need to solve those problems, you're going to build great businesses, because that's basically the goal of every business, is to solve a problem and or a challenge for someone, and or help people create an outcome.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Last thing I got, how can the Cashflow Hustler listeners get in touch with you?
So they could check out my podcast at cashflowninja.com. It's cashflowninja.com. And for your listeners, I have a video series that I'm making available. I'm actually in the process of finishing it up. They can access it at yourownbankingsystem.com. It's yourownbankingsystem.com, where I walk through the cash flow banking and infinite banking strategy, how to integrate it with investments, and then also look at other wealth creation and wealth building strategies along with that.
All right, perfect. We'll put all that good stuff in the show notes, and so the listeners can link into that. Yeah, that's all I got for today, man. I really thank you so much for sharing a little bit of knowledge and some of your passion and your journey with the listeners today. I know I always find it inspiring, and appreciate you coming on the show this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I was honored to be on your show, and had a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.